Welcome to Learning Through Math, the podcast. I'm Laura at I Teach the Why.
I'm Karina at Mrs. Cousins 5. Our mission is to inspire ourselves and others to keep learning and improving with passion.
And hugs! You can find us at learningthroughmath.com and on Twitter at Laura and Karina.
Come and join us on this journey of learning.
Thanks for joining us. We are recording this in October of 2020.
And welcome to episode 18, Two Math Whisperers.
I can't wait for this one.
This will be interesting.
We want to give a shout out to Emily, who reached out to us on Twitter. She's from, not really your neck of the woods, but Canada.
Yeah, she's from Alberta.
And she said, a relatable math podcast by teachers. Better yet, these two will really crack you up.
Oh my gosh. Again, I'm so glad that others are laughing with us.
Maybe at? I don't know. We'll think it's with.
That's all right.
Our reflection this week is about last week's episode.
You had mentioned that the standard algorithm was created to save paper and ink. Right? It was just a shortcut because these things were precious. These materials were precious. They weren't readily available.
P.S. I couldn't verify that this week, but I must have learned that somewhere along the way.
Yeah, we'll keep searching for the source. Yes. But I shared that with the students, and I think a lot of them were like, oh, okay. I think it just made it okay for them to continue using
other methods.
You know what I'm saying? So that they could...
That it wasn't the end-all, be-all.
Right. I think that was my point with them. Mm-hmm. That it's a good strategy to know, right? It's something that they'll be asked to know.
Right.
However, it's not the only thing.
Right. And one of my fourth grade teachers came up to me this week and said about subtraction across zeros. And I said to her, well, have you considered teaching your kids the constant difference where you can just back it down by 1?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I don't think she had thought of that strategy. Yeah. And I said, listen, I know you're teaching it now, but remember, these standards are to be mastered by the end of the school year.
That's right.
So if they don't have it yet, it's okay.
It's okay.
Well, one thing when I was diving into whether or not the standard algorithm was to save paper and ink, I had a book called A Curious History of Mathematics, The Big Ideas from Primitive Numbers to Chaos Theory by Joel Levy, and I'll put it in the show notes. I thought that might have been where I saw it, but it wasn't. But I did come across about our numerals for our Hindu Arabic system. And I knew that our numbers were based on that. Our numerals were based on that, I should say. But this one... little section says counting angles, an interesting take on Hindu Arabic numerals as natural indicators of the numbers 1 through 9 relates to the number of angles in straight line forms of the numerals. Count the angles in the numbers below and you will see that they correspond to the value of each numeral. The same principle applies to the symbol for 0, which has no angles.
So,
and if you're thinking about 1, and we just write one straight line going down, but this has the diagonal going up and then a straight line coming down.
Yeah.
So I'll link that picture in the show notes, but that blew my mind.
Right.
That, the number of angles, I wonder if that was intentional.
I feel like it must be.
It must have been.
It can't be a coincidence.
Exactly.
It cannot be a coincidence.
10 symbols?
Yeah.
It can't be.
No.
I thought that was kind of
cool.
And
I wonder if that kind of spurred the idea of touch math, those dots where it helps kids to visualize and count those dots and helps them with their number sense.
One more reflection I had was to go back to our cute little sayings episode.
Yeah.
And, I've been at a few schools and I have things saved in different locations. So sometimes I have things on flash drives and some things I have on Google Drive.
Right.
Well, I came across these two that I absolutely love. And one, it's an unknown author, but it was based on another saying about amateurs versus professionals. But again, no known author. And it is, work with kids until they can't get it wrong, not until they get it right. Right?
Yeah.
And the other one was patterns matter.
Yes.
Patterns matter.
100%. Yes.
And I made a little graphic of it.
Yes.
And I remember when we were at the same school, I gave that to some kids to shade in or color in so that they could color in different patterns for things.
Yeah.
And I stuck them up around the school. I don't know if you remember that
I
or
don't.
not. Yeah. It might have been right after you left that year that I was still there and you weren't.
Our good news this week.
What was yours?
Brody was telling me about some time that he was using on Success Maker, which is the math program that we use here in our district. And he said that he was adding decimals. So I asked him, tell me about it. What does it look like?
And he's in what grade? Fourth grade. So they're just starting to learn about decimals.
Right.
Okay.
So really adding decimals is a 5th grade standard. Right. But it's okay. I also kind of heard Graham Fletcher in my mind saying, that he taught his daughter a year ahead. So I'm like, okay, this is now my turf. So this is good. I know what I'm doing. I know what I need to do, right? And what they need to know. So he starts to talk to me about decimals and how he understood, the place value. And then I showed him the models, the manipulatives, right? We took that out and I explained to him.
10 blocks.
Yes, the base 10 blocks. And I explained to him how it's not the model, like the actual thing, the actual rod isn't 10, it's what it can represent. And that the small cube or the unit cube, it's the relationship between those two that's important, because it's always a tenth of it, right? And of course I didn't tell him all this. I had him kind of come up with it, right? So I got him to say,
what do you wonder?
Right, how many times smaller is it, or what's the relationship between them? Anyway, so we had that whole conversation. And then as we're talking, and we went on different tangents, like we kind of went all over the place, but then we brought it back, but it was one of those moments where I'm like, yes. He says, wait, I need a number line.
I need a number line. And he drew a number line because we were talking about because he asked the question of why is it called a tenth and 100th. 10 is less than 100. Why is 100th less than a tenth? Okay.
Right? So I got into fractions with him, right? So we were going down all these different avenues, and that's when he was like, we were talking about a half and a fourth.
Okay.
And that's at that point is when he was like, I need a number line. As soon as we started talking about fractions.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I just remember, like, I had like a flashback of his reaction of I need a number line to the reaction of my students, like when I said let's use a number line, and they all groaned. So it's this complete opposite. Because they just don't know how to use it. So here's a kid who understands how to use it and how powerful the number line is, which I think we should totally do a whole episode on, by the way.
Okay, we can do that.
And versus a class full of students that really don't understand the power of the number line.
Or any other tool.
Right, well, that's true too, but especially the number line.
That breaks my heart.
But that was
for our kids.
That was supposed to be good news.
Well, good news for Brody.
Good news for Brody.
Yay. My good news is that I got to use my knowledge and assessments from math recovery that I learned last year, and I'm still working on my math recovery specialist part 1 training.
Right.
To be finished with that at the end of this school year. And I got to use the assessments. I worked with 6 different kids this week, and I'm not done assessing them, but I got to see things that they know and things that they don't know. And I can't wait to be able to choose a few of those students to work with, but also to share that information with the teachers,
right,
so that they have a direction as to where to go to work with the kids. You know what's probably the most difficult part for teachers is knowing when your kids come in and they don't have the number sense. It's like, well, they don't have it, but okay, you've got to do something about it. You can't just say, okay, they don't know it, now what? You've got to be able to back up. But we both know in reality that's so hard because you have the grade level standards to be working with at the same time.
And a scope to follow. I think that's the hardest part too, is that there's restrictions on time and you have to stay with a certain
But if we do take those 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of whatever class period, morning meeting or math or recess,
right,
whatever, and do that number sense routine, whether it's a number talk or which one doesn't belong or same but different math or any of those number sense routines, how powerful they can be. And I think we have to just keep trying to get the word out that you have to give this time in order to make it worth the students' time in the future exponentially.
Yeah, what is that? It'll pay out dividends?
Yes, in the long run.
Yeah, it will.
You got it. Okay, today's topic. We are going to talk about being two math whisperers. When I offered this title to you, you kind of looked at me like, well, what are we going to talk about? Well, I got to thinking three things. I've heard of The Horse Whisperer. And have you seen that movie or read the book?
No.
Me neither. Now I kind of want to because of this. The Dog Whisperer, Cesar Millan. And did you ever read the Baby Whisperer books when your kids were born? I think they just probably came out when Christian was born. So, of course, I was reading, everything I possibly could.
Yeah, I don't think so.
All baby books conflict all the information.
100%, yeah.
I remember my mom telling me, stop reading, because I didn't know what to do. And I think you just kind of go with your gut. But anyway, I think I'm a baby whisperer because I love to hold babies and soothe them and calm them down. And usually I can get them to go to sleep. I don't know. Do you remember?
I remember you coming over and doing
when
that.
When Alex was a baby and I was like, yay, let me have her. And all my friends know that I love holding babies. And I do consider myself a baby whisperer. So when we talk about being two math whisperers, what does that mean to you, being a math whisperer?
I have to admit that at first I was a little confused with this suggestion for this episode. But then as I started to think and write, I just ended up writing almost 2 pages worth, okay? So it did get my juices going. The first thing I wrote, and I was kind of thinking, processing, was being a math whisperer means sharing math with others when they are ready.
Ooh.
Okay, so let me explain that.
Okay.
We know that in order for teachers to change, they have to want to change.
Right.
They have to recognize that there's a need to change. They don't just change because someone tells them to change.
Right. They have to see the value of the change.
Yes. And it's like any kind of PD, right?
Right.
We could all be an excellent PD, but if we're not ready for that next step
to implement it,
it's useless.
Pointless. Yep.
Right.
Waste of time.
A math whisperer then is there kind of patiently waiting in the wings until the audience is ready to listen. So that's how I kind of interpreted it. And it's like being that little voice, that best practice voice of reason. Okay. I've shared with my team, my personal, 5th grade team, many times that long division is not a standard for 5th grade. Right. It's not something that needs to be taught. It can be taught in 5th.
Right.
Because it's a strategy, but it's not something that the students need to know, have to master yet.
Right. Because in our state, it's a 6th grade standard.
Right. Years go by after I keep, repeating. And finally, I remember last year someone said, well, I know you don't teach it like this, so how do you teach it?
Oh.
Right?
Yay!
So it's kind of like that voice just in the background. And I hear your voice all the time. So I know you are a math whisperer.
Aww.
And just this week, actually, it was funny. We were talking about multiplying by powers of 10. And of course, one of my kids said we had like 8 times 10. And one of my kids said,
oh God,
just add 0. So I hear Laura in my head saying, put plus and 0. And that's exactly what I wrote. So I think to me, that's what a math whisperer is. It's just someone that's there and waiting.
Interesting. So I took it as the opposite, where I'm listening to the audience.
Gotcha.
Right? I'm always trying to listen to what the students are saying and how they're interpreting whatever concept is being taught. And then that's when I can start making my moves, right?
Right.
As a teacher. So it's listening.
And as a coach, though, I think that's where your coach position comes in, because you're listening to what the teachers are saying, and then how are you going to help guide them there without necessarily pushing. Right?
Yes. And it is waiting for them to be ready to hear what I have to say or suggest, or, hey, what about going to this website, or check this article out, or this book. Or like when that 4th grade teacher came up to me this week, I felt, wow, like I don't even know you yet. I don't. And thank you for coming up to me. And the first thing she said was, I have a question for you. And I said, okay, I hope I have the answer. And she goes, oh, you do. And I felt very honored.
Right.
You know.
Did you have the answer?
I did.
Was the answer in a book?
It was not. It was about subtracting across zeros.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But we got to have another conversation later in the week about some other strategies that she could possibly do with the kids.
But again, see, she was ready.
Right.
She came to you ready for a different way.
A different perspective. Mm-hmm. Yep. A different way to teach it. I was also thinking that we know a lot of people that are math whisperers.
Oh,
too.
yes.
However, we have to figure out how to get teachers to become math whisperers. Mm-hmm. Right? To be able to listen to the students and hear the thoughts that they have to share, but also to have the teachers have that want and desire to keep learning something.
Yeah.
Which again, that's our $1 million question of how do we get teachers to want to become learners?
Right.
I think if we just keep whispering in their ears.
Although I still kind of want to shout it from the rooftops,
Listen,
right?
We're not really whisperers. I mean, I think you can hear it in our voices even when we're recording this. Oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you, my school roommate and we're both very animated. She's an SAI teacher, so she teaches reading. But again, she's got to be very animated and loud. Right. And I went to my principal this week and I said, if we end up with an extra room, could I have it, please? And I told my roommate that I was doing that, and she kind of was like, oh, good, because when you were teaching in that 3rd grade class, I popped by the window. Actually, she came to see if I needed to go to the bathroom, which I thought that was so super sweet of her. And she said, and I saw your arms moving, and you're all animated, and she was thinking in her head, I'm like that too.
Right.
So I think we might be a little conflicting.
Yes.
And I have shared room with people in the past. Our friend Kathy and
Yeah.
she's trying to do small group reading, and here I am trying to keep, 14 kids quiet and myself quiet.
Right.
And I'm not quiet. Nope.
No.
Neither are you.
No. No, so that's why when you said math whisperers, I'm like, what? We're not whisperers. We're shouters. And I feel like we need to shout because sometimes it's aggravating. This has been going on for years and years and like enough already. But then again, there's this balance, right? We need the balance of when people are ready, they will come. But again, you don't know what you don't know. And if someone's not telling you, how are you going to know?
Exactly. Our challenge for this week is to share with us how you are a math whisperer.
Or what are your thoughts on being a math whisperer?
Absolutely. I can't wait to see what people share with us.
Yeah.
You can either email us or tag us on Twitter. Thanks for joining us. We'd love for you to subscribe to our podcast and give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcasting platform. We invite you to join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag #LearningThroughMath.
We'd love to hear your feedback. Make sure to tag us at Laura and Karina. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
To you too.